Very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome you all in today's 142nd CP program organized by WSB of ICI this year. Today, we are fortunate enough, we are having Honorable Vice Chairman of J&K Branch CA, Vineet Kohli ji. Welcome to you, Vineet sir, on the platform of WSB of ICI.
Thank you so much.
We are having with us today's learned speaker, C.A. Sarika Gossain ji, to deliberate today's webinar. Welcome to you, ma'am. I also welcome all the participants of today's webinar. As we all are aware that WSB has organized approximately 141 and 142 CP program this year. And yesterday also we have organized a program on key audit consideration of ESDM sector. So today our main topic is very important. We are covering two important standards. We are covering two important standards from 500 series, 520, 540 and 580. Auditing, accounting, estimates and written representations. And these two standards are very important and related. And in order to tackle these two standards, we are having with us Madam Sarika Gossain ji. So without wasting much more time, as Honorable Chairman and Honorable Vice Chairman, Auditing and Assurance Standard Board both are stuck up in other meetings. So I take this liberty to start this webinar. And I request Honorable Vice Chairman of J&K Branch, Vineet Kohli ji, to please start the proceedings of today's webinar. Over to you, Vineet ji, please.
Thank you so much, sir. I welcome all for today's webinar on auditing, accounting estimates and representation organized by AASB of ICAI, chaired by CA Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Singhal ji and Dr. Vishal Doshi, Vice Chairman, in their absentia. So let me now take privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Sarika Gossain ji. CA Sarika is a chartered accountant and a company secretary, and also hold a diploma in IFRS from ACCA, UK, and in BRSR from ICAI. She has got more than 21 years of post-qualification experience. Currently, she is heading the technical function of Mazars in India and also leading firm ESG and sustainability practice. Her current responsibilities include technical research advisory and L&D initiatives and ESG projects of the firm. Her past experience includes servicing large clients in the areas of audit, accounting, and advisory. On professional fronts, she has co-authored 2 books and also speaks on a couple of forums. She also keeps taking up a couple of educational projects with ICAI. So with this, I may now request CA Sarika Gossain ji to please take the screen and start the webinar.
Thanks, Vineet ji, for your kind introduction, and thanks ICI again for inviting me over to share my views. I'm sure a couple of you or some of you might have seen me speaking on ESG more these days, but since accounting and auditing is my first baby, I always keep taking up speaking opportunities on these aspects. So my apologies today, you might not see me in the same energy what I have been using because I'm not keeping well, and that's the winter gift what most of us are getting together with some extensive traveling these days. But I was just speaking to Vineet ji right before this that you were taking the session, you're not well. I said I am always well when I'm on my work. So as and when I leave working or I take rest, I become even sicker. So that's the reason I don't even think that I'm sick. But due to bad throat and all, my apologies if I cough in between or I take a water break, etc. But I'll try to keep my same energies as I always had. So as Sir mentioned that it's a very important topic today, and since we get to audit historical data and the data which is already recorded in the books of accounts, auditing that aspect is very, very easy. But when it comes to auditing something which is not exactly the number what is written and what it should be, it at times become difficult because how that number is arrived and how that estimate is being done, that requires a lot of expertise and understanding of the subject matter. And therefore, auditing that aspect really becomes even tougher for audits. this accounting estimate not only plays a very important area or a role in financial statements or financial information, but I can also add saying that the accounting estimate also plays very important part while we audit non-financial information also. Being an auditor, we have to also review other information which are part of the company's annual financial report. For example, director's report and now ESG report or BRSR report, so to say. So there are a couple of non-financial information as well, which are prerogative of statutory auditors to review to some extent. There we have to use a lot of estimates, and therefore it becomes very, very important for us to understand how to understand that accounting estimate or non-accounting estimate, how to verify the assumptions used for it, and how to audit it, and how to say that the particular transaction gives a reasonable assurance or a limited assurance. So we will talk about those in detail today. We will also talk about written representations related to accounting estimates and other aspects. Some of you might be thinking, what new are we doing? Ever since we started doing a chartered accountancy, we know what is accounting estimate, we know what is representation. There are set formats which are issued by ICAI or by auditing standard. There are sample written representations which are given at the end of the auditing standard. So what's new? I'm not going to talk about anything afresh or new or something which is eye-opening, to be very honest. But we will be reiterating some of very important aspects which are very, very easy to understand. But at times, the things which are very easy to understand, and we keep looking at those items in our day-to-day lives, we tend to miss those. So the idea of today's session is to collectively reiterate on those aspects which we feel are very easy to our lives, but we somehow miss to bring attention to those aspects. So today, as Sir mentioned, we would be covering two aspects technically, one on accounting estimate and written representation. So just allow me to share my screen and let me know if that is visible. And I missed to ask if I am loud enough to be heard by the audience.
It's fine, madam. Fine, madam.
Yes.
Yeah, my screen is visible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let's quickly understand and see what we are going to cover today. So we will technically understand the scope of the standard. We will then understand what really accounting estimates are, some of the examples what we get to hear. Then we will understand what is the nature of accounting estimates, the objective of SA 540, then risk assessment procedure or processes, what we are supposed to pursue for identifying and understanding those accounting estimates. The next in the row comes identifying and assessing the risk relating to that, and how we would respond to the those risks what have been assessed. Substantive procedure post responding to those risks depending upon the risk what we have identified. Then we will also understand how to evaluate the reasonableness of accounting estimate. Coming to an end, we will understand disclosures and how to draft or what are the specific areas of written representations relating to accounting estimates. So this is all there in our kitty today. So we would divide our session in such a manner that at least an hour's time we would spend here, and rest of the time we would spend on the written representation part. We will also see some of the industry practices related to accounting estimates. What are the key items which are generally used where the companies use accounting estimates? What are the key disclosures? What are the languages generally we use, just for your quick reference. So coming to the first part of ours today, and we will keep revising in between so that I know auditing standard, when we keep reading and we keep going through this standard, it seems कितना आसान है और कुछ भी तो नहीं है इसमें. But when it comes to summarization of the same, application of the same, getting the key items out of it, then we find it difficult. So therefore, keeping pace with the language part is always essential. Taking sessions for accounting standards, at least for me, is relatively easy because that's quite technical. There are numerical questions, there are technical questions, but unlike that, it is slightly difficult to keep pace and momentum on for auditing standard. But I will attempt my 100%, barring this bad throat, to keep pace, to keep that momentum, to keep the energy on. So coming back to our session, which is on accounting estimate, what does my standard on accounting estimate cover? That means what is the scope? So its scope is to cover or to elaborate auditor's responsibility for accounting estimates, fair value estimates, and related disclosure. So it will tell me how auditors are responsible with respect to accounting estimates, fair value estimates, and related disclosure. The second very important aspect is how I will link this standard with two very important standards, which are 315 and 330. What are these two standards? These two standards largely talk about risk assessment, understanding the environment of the company, and my response to that risk assessment. Then, largely in the scope part, we will also understand requirements and guidance on misstatement of individual accounting estimate and indicators of possible management bias. So when we read through these lines, बहुत आसान लगती है, again, as I just mentioned. But when we keep breaking it and we understand the real story behind it, at times it is very difficult, and at times it is very, very important. So I'm sure everybody out here should know, and I find it slightly difficult at times when I am in a webinar because I'm always into habit of asking questions, raising queries, answering as a two-way conversation to keep my audience engaged. Here it seems that I am talking, and then later I'm just responding to some of your queries. But I try my level best to keep that momentum on. So I'm sure most of you would know what is management bias or that bias. Bias means favor. So as and when, if there are indicators that the management is choosing one application method than the other, so our skepticism should arise that why this not, or vice versa. So we will also understand that there are and there can be some indicators which gives rise to possibility of management bias when it comes to choosing a method to calculate accounting estimate. So this is all about the scope of the standard. I just repeat, this standard covers the auditor's responsibility for accounting estimate, fair value estimate, and related disclosure. It does link with two other standards which relates to risk assessment and response thereto. It also gives us the requirements and guidance on material misstatement of individual accounting estimates, and if there is any indication of management favor or management choice because of some reasons known to them. Now, what can be and what are understood as accounting estimates in our day-to-day life? Let's understand some of the examples. Allowances for doubtful debts. It's solely based on past trends and some calculations and some parameters or some estimate. Inventory obsolescences, warranty provisions, depreciation method or useful life of the assets, provisions against carrying amount of an investment, outcome of long-term contracts, financial obligations, or cost arising from litigation, settlements, and judgment. So these are some of the examples where most of the time we use estimate. That estimate may be the result of the past practices of the company, past trends, some future calculations, some management perception, some regulatory mandate, or anything else. So, as I started with saying that auditing any fixed number, for example, the salary paid to an employee or amount capitalized as a PPE, etc., is relatively easier. Auditing there too is also easy. But when it comes to verification of estimates, or rather calculating an estimate or issuing an audit opinion on estimate or part there too, is very, very difficult because it requires a lot of judgment and some data which needs to be checked. If I talk about fair value estimate, that also requires our strategic understanding to calculate, to understand, to verify. Some of the examples might be complex financial instruments, which are not traded in active or open market, because if it is traded, you have the market value. So no estimate from our side at least is required. And that's a publicly known figure and we can verify it. For example, share price. Share-based payments, it requires a lot of estimates. The longevity of the employees, the percentage, etc., etc. Property or equipment held for disposal, what can be the useful life, what is the residual value, etc. That requires again the estimation to be done from our side. Certain assets or liabilities acquired in a business combination, including goodwill and intangible asset. Again, a lot of calculations are arrived while we do PPA. Transactions involving exchange parties without monetary consideration. That means barter transactions, where money is not involved in the transaction. You have to assess the value of consideration received or paid. So these are some of the examples where accounting estimates or fair value accounting estimates really does impact our lives as auditor, or even if we are chartered accountants and we are working in corporates, then as a corporate professional. So far we understood about the importance of accounting estimates, what does this standard covers, and what are some of the examples which fall within the category of accounting estimates or fair value accounting estimates. I'm sure we are good to go. And if you have any queries, please keep raising to the organizers. And to the extent I know, I have the capability of addressing, I will get back to you at the end. And if anything requires any further research or some more facts from your side, if it's a specific query, we will get back to you by tomorrow if you send that query to the organizers today. That's my commitment. Now, what is the nature of the accounting estimates? So again, very simple definition. Accounting estimates are those items which cannot be measured precisely but can only be estimated, as the name suggests. So the measurement objective of the estimate depends upon various aspects and largely on the applicable financial reporting framework. Now the question comes, what is the meaning of applicable financial reporting framework? That means the framework or the skeleton or the accounting rules or set of rules within which we are preparing those set of financial statements or that financial summary, so to say, is my applicable reporting financial framework. That can be anything. For example, the AS which are issued by ICI, the AS which are issued by or under the Accounting Standard Rules of Companies Act. It may be AS or Ind AS as well. It may be US GAAP. It may be any other framework. So, some of the accounting estimate, the objective may be to forecast. So, why we are discussing this कि हम ये estimate calculate क्यों कर रहे हैं. So calculate करने का purpose या objective क्या है, that's what we are understanding. So as I said, हमने जितना भी अभी तक पढ़ा है, आपको ऐसा नहीं लगेगा कि मैंने कुछ नया बताया है, मैंने कुछ ऐसा बताया है जो हमने उस एंगल से कभी देखा ही नहीं था. The objective is to reiterate, re-summarize और re-emphasize on these important aspects because हमें ये day-to-day life में we have to keep using these. So for some of the accounting estimates, the objective may be to forecast the outcome of one or more transactions, events, or condition. For example, in case of a due diligence or any similar transaction where the transaction will depend upon the success of that evaluation or study, that is my estimate. So वहां पे बहुत सारी चीजें आप एस्टिमेट करेंगे, द वैल्यू ऑफ द एसेट, द वैल्यू ऑफ द लायबिलिटी, द नेट रिजल्टेंट वैल्यू ऑफ द बिजनेस, एंड देन वी हैव टू सी वेदर जो हमने अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट्स यूज किए एसेट लायबिलिटी निकालने के लिए या वैल्यू ऑफ द बिजनेस निकालने के लिए, will it be favorable for me to get into that deal. So अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट मेजर करने का एक ऑब्जेक्टिव ये हो सकता है कि उसकी वजह से आई विल सी माय आउटकम ऑफ एनी ट्रांजैक्शन, इवेंट और कंडीशन. The other objective or other mandate to calculate the accounting estimate may be to express in terms of the value of the current transaction or financial statements based on the conditions prevalent at a measurement date. For example, किसी आइटम की वैल्यू जो आज एग्जिस्ट करता है वो फ्यूचर में उसकी फेयर वैल्यू क्या होगी, उसमें भी बहुत सारी assumptions यूज होती हैं. आपका IRR क्या है, आपका पीरियड क्या है होल्डिंग दैट एसेट एंड लायबिलिटी, उससे रिलेटेड और assumptions क्या है, कॉन्टिन्यूटी क्या है, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. सो लार्जली जो हम फेयर वैल्यू कैलकुलेट करते हैं या एस्टिमेट कैलकुलेट करते हैं, देयर मे बी टू major objective, either to see the result of any transaction, event or condition which has to happen in future, or to see the value of the current transaction in future. This is a very important statement. What you can see on your screen is, and I would like all of you to read through that together, the difference between outcome of the accounting estimate and the amount originally disclosed in the financial statement does not necessarily represent a misstatement of financial statement, particularly for fair value accounting estimate. What does that really mean? ये लाइन ये कहना चाहती है कि अगर आपको एक डिफरेंस दिखाई दे रहा है अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट जो आपने किया है जो कि ओरिजिनली बुक्स में था और जो अब आपने कैलकुलेट किया है, राइट, लार्जली किसके बारे में बात करें, फेयर वैल्यू के बारे में बात करें. अगर दोनों में डिफरेंस है, इट डजंट मीन कि जो मेरा ओरिजिनली रिकॉर्डेड अमाउंट था वो मिसस्टेटेड था. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, in case of any business combination transaction, the value of the item may be booked at a different value, but it may be valued at a different amount for the business deal. So it doesn't mean अगर मैंने एक historical cost opt किया है तो वो गलत है और fair value उसकी ज्यादा है तो मिस स्टेटमेंट है. ऐसा हो सकता है बट हमेशा ऐसा नहीं होगा. Now, as I just mentioned, the objective of calculating my accounting estimate is to get sufficient, appropriate audit evidence, and these are the combination of 4 words we get to hear so many times in different standards. So somebody in one of the conferences was mentioning SAAE. I said, what does that mean? He said, you don't know, इतनी बार हम ये पढ़ते हैं. So it really means sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. कितनी बार ये आता है? So he created an abbreviation. So कई abbreviations होती हैं जैसे BFF और news is an abbreviation, etc. So these are generally used, but he created the abbreviation for this, SAAE, sufficient appropriate audit evidence. And that's how I remember this word very clearly. See, the objective of this standard is to get the sufficient appropriate audit evidence in the context of, if you talk about AFRF, so applicable financial reporting framework, this is not an abbreviation which is generally used. I use for my own sake because ये छोटा सा थोड़ा कम जगह लेता है. So इसका जो purpose है, it is to obtain accounting estimate including fair value accounting estimate in the financial statement, whether recognized or disclosed, and they are reasonable. So मेरा purpose as an auditor क्या है कि कहीं पे भी किसी भी financial statements में या non financial statements में अगर कोई भी accounting estimate या तो recognize हुआ है या disclose हुआ है, वो reasonable है. अब the definition, the meaning, the measurement of reasonability is very, very different from one auditor to the other. Very, very subjective. You might say half of the glass is empty. I might say half of the glass is full. So reasonableness and the measurement, the disclosure, if I might say, yes, it is appropriate or correct, you might have your own reasons to doubt. Very, very subjective. But largely, whoever is auditing with his own experience and or evidence in place and audit procedures, what he followed, that accounting estimate should hold good or should hold reasonable whenever it is disclosed or recognized. Further, हम जितने भी स्टैंडर्ड्स पढ़ते हैं, अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स, जो कि किसी भी टॉपिक की अकाउंटिंग के बारे में बात करते हैं, वो रिकग्निशन, मेजरमेंट, प्रेजेंटेशन एंड डिस्क्लोजर, 4 चीजों के बारे में बात करते हैं. सो कोई भी आइटम की अकाउंटिंग कंप्लीट नहीं है अगर वो प्रॉपरली प्रेजेंट और डिस्क्लोज नहीं हुआ है. सो अगर एक अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट रीजनेबली कहीं फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स में, चाहे डिस्क्लोजर में, चाहे मेरे P&L में, चाहे बैलेंस शीट में, चाहे कैश फ्लो में, कहीं पे भी आ रहा है, वो उसकी रीजनेबलनेस पूरी नहीं होगी अगर वो उसका जो डिस्क्लोजर है वो पूरा नहीं है. सो मेरी ड्यूटी एज एन ऑडिटर इज नॉट ओनली टू असेस इफ इट इज रिकग्नाइज्ड प्रॉपरली, आई ऑल्सो हैव टू सी इफ इट इज डिस्क्लोज्ड appropriately or not. Now moving to a slightly tougher stage of it, which is risk assessment procedure. So I'm not scaring you, but we are moving to a level up in terms of the complexity involved. So far what we have done, we have understood the importance of accounting estimate because it is not a fixed number. You might calculate something else, the other auditor might calculate something else. But what is more important for us to understand that we follow certain set principles in terms of accounting and auditing. Accounting estimates are based on some assumptions. There are different accounting estimates for calculating the outcome of future event or calculating the fair value of any item which is presently existed. Debtors provision, inventory obsolescence, even going concern assumption also requires a lot of assumptions to evaluate and to give opinion on whether the company is a going concern or not. And once we give the assurance or report that a company is a going concern, the standard says that is not a fixed stamp for the company that the company would run for foreseeable future. Anything can happen post year end. So we understood that so far. Now we are moving to the next level, which is risk assessment procedures. So we went for an audit. We did a planning. We understood these are material items which are required to be audited. And out of assessment of that materiality, we get to know that these are the items which we have to audit. These are the historical values which are fixed, and these are some estimates which are based on some assumptions, maybe past trends or future projections, right? So we reach to that level, we reach to that bifurcation. Now we pick those items. What next? We have to see कि वो जो item हमने choose किए हैं for audit, the estimates, अगर हम उसको ठीक से ऑडिट नहीं करते या वो एस्टिमेट्स निकाले कैसे गए हैं, व्हाट इज द मैनेजमेंट मेथड, व्हाट आर द अजम्पशंस, उसके अराउंड रिस्क क्या है, अगर वो अजम्पशंस चेंज होती है या वो पैरामीटर्स चेंज होती है, व्हाट इज द रिस्क अराउंड इट, हाउ दोज आर डिटरमिन्ड, वो प्रोसीजर अब हमें करना है. सो इफ वी कैन rely on the broader aspect of any transaction, my substantive procedures gets reduced to a large extent. So before starting the evaluation of any accounting estimate, the auditor is supposed to have an understanding of three important aspects. One is requirement of relevant applicable financial reporting framework, which is relevant for that estimate. How management has identified those transactions, events, and conditions, jahan pe there was a need to calculate that estimate, and how the management has made those estimates. So these are the three important aspects which we need to understand while we do the risk assessment procedure, right? So पहला क्या है? पहला है कि कौन से फ्रेमवर्क में हम बना रहे हैं वो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स और फाइनेंशियल समरी जहां पे हमें अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट ऑडिट करना है, उसकी रिक्वायरमेंट क्या है. दूसरा कि मैनेजमेंट ने कैसे वो ट्रांजैक्शंस को आइडेंटिफाई किया है, वो ट्रांजैक्शंस की इवेंट्स को आइडेंटिफाई किया है. एंड तीसरा, मैनेजमेंट ने उसे एक्चुअली कैसे कैलकुलेट किया है. वो सारी चीजें मुझे रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर्स करने से पहले आई नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. जितनी छोटी एंटिटी होगी उतना मेरा लेस कॉम्प्लेक्स ट्रांजैक्शंस होंगी और उतना ही मेरा प्रोसीजर, मेरे ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स विल बी रिड्यूस्ड और विल बी लेस कॉम्प्लेक्स. Now, you know, risk assessment procedures and related activity. So, हमें कैसे वो accounting estimates देखना है, उसका मैनर क्या है. So, सबसे पहले हमें ये देखना है कि वो मेथड कैसे उन्होंने यूज किया है. तो अगर कोई भी इंटरनल डेवलप मेथोडोलॉजी है या एक्सटर्नली डेवलप्ड मेथोडोलॉजी है, तो इंटरनली डेवलप्ड जो है उस पे आप कम रिलाई करोगे, वो थोड़ी सी ज्यादा रिस्की होगी. उसके अराउंड कंट्रोल्स क्या है, क्योंकि जितने रोबस्ट कंट्रोल्स होंगे आपका रिलायंस उतना ज्यादा होगा. जितने कम कंट्रोल्स होंगे या वीक कंट्रोल्स होंगे आप उन पे ज्यादा रिलाई नहीं कर पाएंगे. क्या मैनेजमेंट ने कोई एक्सपर्ट यूज किया है, दैट व्हाट वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड. सो ये सारे प्रोसीजर्स, ये सारे क्वेश्चंस हमें तब रेस करने हैं जब हम उसका रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर्स कर रहे हैं. रिस्क असेसमेंट प्रोसीजर हम क्यों कर रहे हैं कि जो हम एस्टिमेट निकाल रहे हैं उसके अराउंड रिस्क क्या है, वो कैन इट गो राइट, कैन इट गो रॉन्ग, एक्सेट्रा. जो इवैल्यूएशन हम कर रहे हैं एस्टिमेट्स का, उसमें assumptions क्या यूज हुई है, अगर उन अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट्स को निकालने के लिए क्या कोई चेंज इन मेथड किया है, तो दैट मीन्स दैट इज raising an antenna that something is going wrong around it. Whether and not मैनेजमेंट ने उस की एस्टिमेशन अनसर्टेनिटी को कैसे असेस किया है. व्हाट डज एस्टिमेशन अनसर्टेनिटी मीन्स कि क्योंकि ये एक एस्टिमेट है, ये तो ऑब्वियसली इसमें कोई ना कोई अनसर्टेनिटी होगी. सो कंपनी ने उसको या मैनेजमेंट ने उसको कैसे असेस किया है. एंड लास्ट ऑन द स्क्रीन इज हाउ ऑडिटर्स आर रिव्यूइंग द आउटकम ऑफ अकाउंटिंग इन द करंट पीरियड, अगर वो पुराने पीरियड में भी उन्होंने यूज किया है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर कंपनी ने डाउटफुल डेट्स पे पुराने सालों में कुछ एस्टिमेशन लगाया है, तो आपको करंट ईयर में भी उसको देखना पड़ेगा. और अगर वो री एस्टिमेट हुए, देन आपको वो भी चेक करना पड़ेगा दैट is it something the company made it in the past period and now they are changing it. That raises an alarm. So all these factors together will constitute my risk assessment procedure around auditing the accounting estimate in place on that accounting estimate. Now, identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So we understood the risk control around that item. Now we will understand कि हम उस particular transaction. Am I audible and my screen is still visible? Because my internet is showing slightly unstable. Okay, I'm assuming it's fine. Okay, so identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement. So as an auditor, what we are supposed to do, we have to evaluate the degree of estimation uncertainty, जो कि accounting estimate के साथ जुड़ी हुई है. We have to determine कि उसमें high estimation uncertainty तो नहीं है. ये बहुत important aspects है which auditors are supposed to do. कि कितना risk है उसमें. अब आपने क्या किया कि आपने financial statements review किए, then you understood the items that you identified and segregated items which are historical and which what are the estimation uncertainty, and उसके अगेंस्ट आपने रिस्क आइडेंटिफाई किया कि ये मेरे रिस्क है. अब रिस्क आइडेंटिफाई करने के बाद व्हाट नेक्स्ट. सो जब मेरे रिस्क आइडेंटिफाई हो गए बिकॉज ऑफ माय प्रीवियस प्रोसीजर, हाउ आई एम गोइंग टू रिस्पॉन्ड. Am I going to reduce my audit procedure? Am I going to increase my audit procedures or extend thereof? So that is called as response to assessed risk. So auditor will determine कि अब जो चीजें हमने वहां पे की थी, सपोज हमने मैनेजमेंट से बात की, उनका तरीका समझा, एस्टिमेशन अनसर्टेनिटी, अब उन सारे स्टेप्स को हमें इधर रिस्पॉन्ड करना है. तो हमने असेस किया था कि एप्लीकेबल रिपोर्टिंग फ्रेमवर्क क्या है, तो अब हमें क्या देखना है कि मैनेजमेंट ने क्या उसको अप्रोप्रिएटली अप्लाई किया है या नहीं किया है. जो मेथड्स उन्होंने लगाए हैं वो अप्रोप्रिएटली लगाए हैं, कंसिस्टेंटली लगाए हैं. ऐसा ना हो कि ईयर ऑन ईयर डिपेंडिंग अपॉन देयर नीड एंड हाउ मच वैल्यू दे वांट टू शो, वो आपके मेथड्स चेंज करते जा रहे हैं. सो अगर आप देख रहे हैं कि कंसिस्टेंटली कोई अकाउंटिंग प्रैक्टिसेस या अकाउंटिंग मेथड्स हमारे फॉलो नहीं हो रहे, दैट रेजेस एन अलार्म कि there is something wrong which is going on. Then we have to consider all the events to auditor's report. Our auditing standard says that we cannot confine and we should not confine our audit procedures till the end of the financial year or some period beyond it. We have to stretch it to the period or around the period till the time we issue our report. So जितने भी हमने estimates किए, ऐसा ना हो कि कंपनी ने कोई estimate year end पे किया, year end खत्म हुआ और उसमें से कुछ उसने reverse कर दिया. So again that raises some antenna of mind कि something got fishy around it. So event occurring after balance sheet date is very, very important aspect to catch hold of these items where something which was considered during the year, so maybe purposefully or because of some inherent incidents that happened, that during the year के बाद आपका बाद में वो item change हो गया हो, re-estimate हुआ. So it's my responsibility that I will extend my audit procedures till the auditor's report. I have to also evaluate the appropriateness of management methods of measurement. I cannot blindly go with what management is saying कि मैंने SLM ले लिया, मैंने WDV ले लिया, मैंने इस लाइफ को 8 साल ले लिया, मैंने 5 साल ले लिया. I have to go with that skeptical mind कि 5 साल क्यों? आपकी इंडस्ट्री में ये चीज 3 साल चलती है या 15 साल चलती है, या आपकी पुरानी प्रैक्टिस बोलती है कि आप इस लैपटॉप को 12 साल यूज करते हैं. 12 साल इज टू मच, मे बी 7 साल यूज करते हैं. तो आपने इस साल यूजफुल लाइफ जो है आपने सिर्फ 3 साल क्यों लिया है? सो यू हैव टू कम विद सम इंटेलिजेंट क्वेश्चंस, प्रोवोकिंग क्वेश्चंस कि जो आप कर रहे हैं वो ठीक है कि नहीं. वी कैन नॉट गो बाय देयर ईयर ऑन management representation letters of assumption. So one is appropriateness, one is reasonableness. We have to also evaluate कि जो उन्होंने assumptions use किए वो reasonable है. ऐसा ना हो कि interest rate बहुत low ले लिया हो, ज्यादा ले लिया हो. Continuity of that project उन्होंने 5 साल लिया है, जबकि हमें पता है कि वो extend होगा ही होगा. Maybe जैसे हम बात करते हैं एक्सटेंशन ऑफ लीज, और कंपनी की एक लीज है और वो 5 साल की है, फर्दर एक्सटेंडेबल बाय 5 years. कंपनी ने उस लीज्ड होल्ड लैंड के ऊपर बहुत एक्सटेंसिव खर्चा किया है और उन्होंने बैंकर्स को एक रिपोर्ट सबमिट की है 15 साल के बिजनेस एक्सपेंशन के लिए, एंड वो लीज इक्वलाइजेशन सिर्फ 5 साल पे कर रहे हैं. सो यू हैव टू क्वेश्चन, क्या आप 5 साल में अपना बिजनेस बंद करने वाले हैं जो आपने लीज पीरियड सिर्फ 5 साल लिया है? सो जो भी उन्होंने assumptions लिए हैं, you have to question, you have to corroborate with other items what they have used with. Test the operating effectiveness of controls. So higher the level of my effectiveness of the control is, lesser is my substantive procedures. That's what we have learned since childhood. So we have to understand the operating effectiveness of the control. That will give more confidence on accounting estimates what have been calculated by the company. Develop a point or range of estimate. So जो भी estimate है, या तो I will exactly calculate the estimate based on some assumptions or calculation, or I will decide on or understand their range. 5 से 3 से 5%, 5 से 10%, or some amount that the debtors confirmation नहीं आया है इतने का, तो हम इतना हम debtors provision करेंगे. So either a range or a point we have to decide mutually. Now, as I just mentioned, and I would like to repeat what we have done so far, we have understood the importance of accounting estimate. What is the objective of the standard? To understand how accounting estimate is calculated. What is auditor's responsibility around auditing estimate? Then, as I mentioned, that higher my assessment around risk assessment is, I would and I can place more reliance on controls. I will have to go for lesser substantive procedure. मैंने risk identify किया, फिर रिस्क आइडेंटिफाई करने के बाद कैसे मैं उसको रिस्पॉन्ड करूंगी, मैंने वो आइडेंटिफाई किया. उसके बाद मैंने कंट्रोल्स टेस्ट किए. उसके बाद व्हाट नेक्स्ट, मैंने देखा कि कंट्रोल्स आर रीजनेबल. सो अब मेरे सब्सटेंटिव प्रोसीजर्स क्या होंगे? That's what I have to see. So as I mentioned, there's a direct proportion, indirect proportion. More reliance on control, lesser my substantive procedures are. So how will I evaluate? We have to evaluate the estimation certainty. ये वही पॉइंट्स है जो हमने बात किए थे, जो हमने डिजाइनिंग के टाइम बात की थी. Sorry. How management has addressed estimation uncertainty. Whether significant assumptions are used by the management seems reasonable to us. Management intent to carry out a specific course of action and its ability to do so. मतलब यहाँ पे कुछ वो biasness वाला एंगल आता है कि मैनेजमेंट का स्पेसिफिक एक्शन लेने का इंटेंट क्या है. Why 5%? Why 2%? Why saying yes to a proposal? Why saying no to a proposal, even if it seems otherwise? And even if company says yes, I will go for extension, does the company has the ability to extend that? That's what we have to see and understand and evaluate. We cannot blindly go with management intent कि कंपनी ने बोला कि यस हम इसको 5 साल के बाद एक्सटेंड करेंगे. क्या कंपनी के पास इतना बिजनेस होगा? क्या कंपनी के पास इतने एक्सटेंडेड ऑर्डर्स होंगे कि वो 5 साल के बाद भी जाएगा? वो सारी चीजें मतलब कहते हैं ना कि जो नकली गोल्ड होता है वो ज्यादा चमकता है. सो whatever papers and documentation is created which seems all fine, we have to go behind the intent of it also. Develop a range with which we have to evaluate the reasonableness of the accounting estimate. हमें देखना है कि जो मैनेजमेंट का रेंज आ रहा है वो सपोज 2 to 3% आ रहा है, मेरा 7 to 8% आ रहा है. इज इट मैचिंग विद माई रेंज? सो ये सब्सटेंटिव प्रोसीजर्स डिसाइड करने के लिए ये सारी चीजें मुझे इवेल्युएट करनी है. बेसिस दिस इवेल्युएशन आई विल डिजाइन माय रिकॉग्निशन एंड मेजरमेंट क्राइटेरिया. सो आई हैव टू सी जो मैनेजमेंट ने मेजरमेंट क्राइटेरिया यूज किया है, चाहे किसी आइटम को रिकॉग्नाइज करने के लिए या नहीं रिकॉग्नाइज करने के लिए, वो ठीक है या नहीं और उसका बेसिस क्या है. उसके बेसिस पे आई विल डिजाइन माय सब्सटेंटिव प्रोसीजर्स. मैं कितने सैंपल्स चेक करूंगी, मैं आई विल गो विद वॉक थ्रूज, आई विल ओनली गो विद एनालिटिक्स एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. there's a specific section कि कंपनी ने जो एस्टिमेट्स निकाले हैं वो रीजनेबल है या नहीं, वो हमें इवेल्युएट करने अगेन और अ सिमिलर पैटर्न. जो सारी चीजें हमने पीछे चेक की थी, हमने मैनेजमेंट एस्टिमेट देखा था, क्लाइंट ने या कोई मैनेजमेंट ने कोई आर्बिट्रेरी अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट चेंज तो नहीं कर दिया है, या जो कंपनी ने एस्टिमेट निकाला है उसको उसके लिए जो अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी यूज की है, जो मैंने पहले भी बात की थी, वो अपना डिजायर्ड रिजल्ट निकालने के लिए उन्होंने कोई अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी या कोई सैम्पलिंग तो नहीं चेंज कर दिया है. इंडिकेटर्स ऑफ पॉसिबल बायसनेस हमें देखना है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, कंपनी was choosing one particular method in past and करंट ईयर में कंपनी को आईपीओ के लिए जाना है, या कंपनी को बैंकर्स को एक प्रोजेक्ट रिपोर्ट सबमिट करनी है, या कंपनी इज गोइंग फॉर इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज एक्सेट्रा. उस पर्पस के लिए उन्हें एक डिजायर्ड रिजल्ट या डिजायर्ड नंबर या डिजायर्ड इवेंट चाहिए थी. उसके लिए उन्होंने कोई पर्टिकुलर डिसीजन चेंज किया या एक पर्टिकुलर डिसीजन के अगेंस्ट कोई बायसनेस दिखाई. दैट्स व्हाट वी हैव टू इवैल्यूएट. And there may be different indicators like companies going against the past trend, companies not doing what their peers are doing, companies not doing what my current industry patterns are saying, etc etc. So that's what is very very important, because estimate can go in any direction, and that would largely depend upon the management perception also, but we cannot blindly rely upon the management viewpoint or representation. We have to challenge it also at times. Again, as I started with saying that recognition and measurement is one aspect, but we have to equally decide and pay attention to the disclosure part of it. आपने estimate बनाया, calculate किया, you are happy with it, but you did not give the adequate disclosures around it, you did not give the presentation what are required to be given, then your accounting fundamentals as per that standard are not complete. So what are the bare minimum requirements as per the standards as far as the disclosure is concerned? We will understand that. So we have to obtain, again my favorite word, sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So we have to obtain sufficient or appropriate audit evidence कि जो disclosures है management के, those are sufficient. And वो क्या क्या होगा कि जो management ने assumption use की है वो fully disclosed है. आपने कोई rate use किया है, आपने कोई year use किया है, आपने longevity use किया है, आपने कोई projection plans, method of estimation आपने क्या लिया है, for example SLM, WTD etc. बेसिस फॉर सिलेक्शन ऑफ मेथड कि आपने इस मेथड को दूसरे मेथड के अगेंस्ट क्यों यूज किया है वो आपको देना है. इफेक्ट ऑफ चेंज और रेंज ऑफ आउटकम, अगर आपने कोई चेंज किया है किसी उसमें, उसका इफेक्ट क्या पड़ेगा, और आउटकम्स की रेंज क्या होगी, फॉर एग्जाम्पल जो हम बात कर रहे हैं अभी तक, परसेंटेज 2 to 5% या 1 से 2 साल, 5 से 6 साल एक्सेट्रा। फेयर वैल्यू अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट्स जो आपने कैलकुलेट किया, क्वालिटेटिव एंड क्वांटिटेटिव बोथ डिस्क्लोजर्स आपको देने हैं। For accounting estimate that gives rise to significant risk, auditor is supposed to evaluate the adequacy of the disclosures of their estimation uncertainty in the context of applicable financial reporting framework, because हर रिपोर्टिंग फ्रेमवर्क का जो मेथडोलॉजी होता है, जो एस्टिमेट निकालने का, वो फर्क होता है। तो जो भी हमें सिग्निफिकेंट रिस्क लगते हैं या एस्टिमेशन अनसर्टेनिटी लगता है, वो आप हर फ्रेमवर्क को आपको पढ़ के समझ आएगा कि आपको क्या देना है। सो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपको वो इवैल्यूएट करना है, उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपको उसका डिस्क्लोजर इवैल्यूएट करके आपको अप्रूव करना है। सो दैट वाज अबाउट द स्टैंडर्ड, बट इस स्टैंडर्ड में we will be covering the written representation separately also, but within this standard itself, with respect to accounting estimates, जो written representation की specific requirements है वो हम यहाँ पे पढ़ेंगे। और हम जो दूसरा स्टैंडर्ड 580 की बात करते हैं, जिसमें नॉर्मल रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशंस की बात करते हैं, वो रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन पे हम पूरा हाफ एन आवर लगाने वाले हैं। वी विल अंडरस्टैंड दैट वेरी क्लियरली एंड वेरी थॉरली। सो ये स्टैंडर्ड मुझे बात करता है कि विद रेस्पेक्ट टू अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट कौन कौन से ऐसे आइटम्स हैं जो मुझे मैनेजमेंट से लिखवा के लेने हैं, बिकॉज इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जो मैनेजमेंट परसेप्शन से जाती है। सो जहां पे भी मैनेजमेंट परसेप्शन, मैनेजमेंट इंटेंशन, मैनेजमेंट इनपुट, मैनेजमेंट फीडबैक की बात आती है, वो मी एज एन ऑडिटर, unless I have reasons to question those otherwise, I have to go with management representation. For example, I always take as a classic example of keeping any fixed asset, for example, laptop. A laptop might have a reasonable life of 4 to 5 years, but one IT company may decide कि हम तो सिर्फ 3 साल ही रखेंगे, कम वॉट में हम उसको सेकेंड हैंड सेल में बेच के we will get a new laptop. Or some company might say that for blue collar job people, or या ऐसे बोलते हैं तो ऐसे भी बोल सकते हैं कि in the first year the till this grade we will give laptop to those categories new laptop, and उससे नीचे की कैटेगरी को हम पुराने लैपटॉप्स देंगे। तो आप उस चीज को क्वेश्चन नहीं कर सकते हो, but what you can do, you can see the past trend, companies SOPs, companies policy, and then you have to corroborate that whatever the management is saying are they following it religiously or not. So accounting estimate से related भी बहुत सारे ऐसे points आते हैं जहाँ पे we have to go with management perception, management wish list. So those are मैनेजमेंट ने जो मेजरमेंट प्रोसेस किया है वो अप्रोप्रिएट है या नहीं, एंड assumptions जो उन्होंने यूज की है और उसका इंटेंट, उनसे हमें ये लिखवाना है कि उन्होंने डिस्क्लोजर्स जो है वो कंप्लीट किए हैं और अप्रोप्रिएट हैं, और सब्सिक्वेंट इवेंट्स वुड नॉट वारंट एन एडजस्टमेंट। दैट मीन्स आपने किसी ऐसी इंटेंट से नहीं किया है कि अभी आपने वो डिस्क्लोजर किया और ईयर एंड के बाद वो चेंज हो जाएगा या चेंज हो जाएगा। सो largely we are done with the standards. We will quickly spend few minutes to see how companies disclose it. So today only I picked up two manufacturing concerns, large ones, and I'm slightly exhausted, and two consulting मतलब service industries, to show you how the accounting estimates, the selection of it, the disclosure of it changes. So first one is Infosys. मैंने उसका कंसोल उठाया है and then see कि क्या उन्होंने दिया है. So critical accounting assumptions and judgment, revenue recognition, उन्होंने explain किया है कि कैसे accounting estimation हमारा वर्क करता है, उसका बेसिस क्या है, उसका रिलेशनशिप क्या है, जो आपका 5 स्टेज है इंडेस 115 का, वो सारी चीजें, लीगल एनफोर्सेबिलिटी अगर कोई है तो. सो दे हैव गिवन ऑल द अकाउंटिंग एस्टिमेट्स एंड जजमेंट्स व्हिच आर यूज्ड फॉर रेवेन्यू रिकॉग्निशन. इफ आई गो नेक्स्ट, इनकम टैक्सेस के लिए भी मेजरली फॉर डेफर्ड टैक्स एंड एनी कंडीशंस डिपेंडेंट, एंड उससे रिलेटेड अगर कोई फ्यूचर प्रोजेक्शंस है, उससे रिलेटेड जो रियलाइजेबिलिटी है, जो भी उसमें प्रोजेक्शंस बनती है, दे हैव डिस्क्लोज्ड इट. They might have undergone a business combination and related intangible assets which might have been acquired. It again requires a lot of estimation and accounting estimate. Uske around they have given a policy and disclosure. For PPE also, because PPE largely requires the useful life assessment, they have given that as well. Now, again for Infosys, they have disclosed goodwill ka impairment. Again, cash generating unit plays a very important role, and how the assessment top up bottom down is done, that is all assumption based. Cash flow projections are used, therefore it requires a lot of assessment in terms of accounting estimate, and that's our area of expertise to see कि हमें कैसे ये audit करना है. Now coming to Tata Motors. Tata Motors में अगर हम देखते हैं तो they have given an overall estimates and judgment. What they have done, they have given in a consolidated manner related to notes, जहाँ पे वो PPE की बात करता है, गुडविल की बात करता है, डेफर्ड टैक्स की बात करता है, प्रोडक्ट वारंटी की बात करता है, एम्प्लॉइज बेनिफिट की बात करता है, क्रेडिट लॉसेस की बात करता है, एंड डिस्काउंट्स, गोइंग कंसर्न एंड कोविड रिलेटेड कुछ उन्होंने एस्टिमेशन अनसर्टेनिटीज लगाई थी. कोपिंग जो नई वेव अब आ रही है, दैट डाइज वेरी सून. नोबडी वांट्स टू हैव द मास्क अगेन, एंड नोबडी वांट्स टू हैव दैट सीन सिटिंग एट होम ओनली. सो होपिंग ये डिस्क्लोजर अगली बार उनके फाइनेंशियल्स में ना हो. सो ये सारे डिस्क्लोजर्स उन्होंने दिए थे. रिलायंस की अगर मैं बात करूं तो क्रिटिकल अकाउंटिंग assumptions के नाम पे उन्होंने oil and gas reserves, which is very specific to their business or mining industry, decommissioning liabilities, where PPE and other intangible assets they have disclosed. Reliance Industries again, recoverability of trade receivable, that requires some bit of estimate, कितना recovery होगा, कब होगा, कितना % होगा. Again, provision is an area which is applicable to every company where it requires a lot of estimations. So it comes under a well-given definition of accounting estimate. Impairment of goodwill, intangible asset, again, all estimation based. Impairment of financial and non-financial asset, again, goodwill, etc., is covered here. Deferred tax, fair value, revenue, leases. Leases also comes with a lot of estimation uncertainty, continuity of the lease, escalation of the price, lease equalization, etc., etc. Now coming to the last company on the screen, which is Tata Consulting. Use of estimates and judgment they have given with respect to revenue recognition, PPE, goodwill, fair value, income tax, deferred tax, provisions of contingent liabilities, employees benefit, fairly standard disclosures which other companies have also given, the service industries, leases. So that's it on the standard. Please keep sending your questions related to this standard. Just a quick overview again, because as I mentioned, and it's very difficult, I know, for listening to somebody for an hour long, coughing badly in between, and I can relate to that. But trust me, I'm keeping myself up to meet your expectation. So accounting estimate, as we know, is something which is not fixed, and it is inevitable while preparing any financial statements or non-financial statements, because a lot many times items are dependent upon certain perceptions of the management, and we have to do that. We have to respect that, but we cannot blindly accept what the management is saying us to do. We have to apply our skeptical mind. We have to ask provoking questions, wherein we have to audit and we have to give the reasonableness. So there is a specific standard called SA 540, which talks about auditing the accounting estimates and written representations related thereto. We understood the objective. An accounting estimate might relate to any outcome of future or any fair value. If the fair value does not match with the existing value in the books of accounts, it doesn't mean that it is not giving the fair representation in the books of accounts and there is something wrong. It is not the case. It is just that the purpose of fair valuation is different, therefore the value was different. We have to understand the controls around estimations. We have to understand the risk around it while calculating it. Based on the risk assessment, my responses to risk assessment, my further procedures are designed as substantive procedure. Lesser the risk, lesser is the extent of my substantive procedures. And I cannot blindly rely upon the management perception. I have to take the representations also. I have to check those. I have to see the past trend. I have to question them. And we also discuss some of the industry practices also. So this is what we have done so far. So I started in the beginning and said this auditing pattern not only would apply to the financial statements, this will also apply to non-financial. So I'm also an ESG auditor. So there's a new requirement for top 150 companies in India. So for top 1,000 listed company, there's a mandate of BRSR reporting. We did a lot in last year. I'm also auditing one of the largest companies in India, which is in top 150 company, wherein we are auditing their sustainability reports. So these procedures, though this will be applied on different items, but the methodology of having the auditor's mindset for estimating the estimates will be the same. So an auditor has to be an auditor, be it a financial auditor or non-financial auditor. So this methodology, if you are auditing the ESG or the sustainability report or any kind of like if you are indulged into a review engagement also, the accounting estimates have to be seen from these lenses only. So that's it on this standard. Now moving to another standard, and then if time allows and my voice allows, we will take up the questions to the extent I know I am capable of answering, as I mentioned. So written representation, again, some of you would say, no, इसमें तो कुछ भी नया नहीं है. Why should we spend another 30 minutes or so in this? No, ऐसा नहीं है. Again, I am in agreement with your viewpoint कि कुछ भी नया नहीं है, लेकिन कुछ ऐसी चीजें हैं with time we read so much that we stop taking those seriously. We stop understanding the gravity of the matter. And these sessions, which are organized by ICI or other chapters or other forums, is not all the time to educate people on the new aspect, but to reiterate some of the important aspect which are existing. Because अगर ऐसा होता तो standards तो गिनती के है ना, हमारे sessions कब के खत्म हो जाते. So the attempt of ICAI or other forums is to keep on reiterating these important aspects, because at times written representations are lifesavers for auditors. Because जो चीज मेरे प्रेरोगेटिव में ही नहीं है, मेरे परव्यू में ही नहीं है, how did I rely? I will be subject to NFRA's review. I will be subject to quality review board's review, where if something is not subject to definitive audit procedures, how did I get comfort? So written representations, well-written representations, reviewed representations saves our life. Not only saves our life, it's my moral duty as an auditor to complete my audit evidence. So I would not say written representation is a substitute of my audit evidence or my audit procedures. That is not the case ever. I have to confine myself within the boundary of auditing standards. If I am able to follow those procedures, is fine. But if something is dependent upon company's perception, I have to take the representations. So we will quickly be understanding the scope and objective of the standard. It is a tool of my audit evidence, a substitute of it in certain cases. How can I rely on these representations? Whom should I speak to for written representation out of the management? Are there any specific management responsibility driven representative? Yes, जैसा कि बोर्ड रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी स्टेटमेंट होता है कंपनीज एक्ट की रिक्वायरमेंट में, ऐसे my auditing standards also throw very important light or responsibility to take management responsibility related representations. Some other representations which directly relates to my financial statements. मेरा क्या पीरियड या फिर डेट होगी जो मेरे रिप्रेजेंटेशन में कवर होगी, कौन सा फॉर्मेट होगा या क्या फॉर्म हो सकता है उसका. अगर मुझे डाउट है रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन पे, देन व्हाट नेक्स्ट. और डाउट करने के बाद आई डिड एक्स्ट्रा स्क्रूटनी एंड आई एम नॉट क्लियर अबाउट द रेजोल्यूशन, देन व्हाट वुड हैपन. एंड अगर रिप्रेजेंटेशंस इन स्पाइट ऑफ माय ऑल एफर्ट्स नहीं मिला मुझे, व्हाट नेक्स्ट. सो अगर मैं स्कोप की बात करती हूँ तो ये डील करता है ऑडिटर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जो मुझे मैनेजमेंट से या फिर दोज चार्ज विद गवर्नेंस. दिस इज अ वेल नोन टर्मिनोलॉजी, TCWG. We'll keep repeating that. वो कंप्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन हमें मिल रही है, चाहे तो डायरेक्ट ऑडिट एविडेंस से, या अगर ऑडिट एविडेंस नहीं मिल रही है तो मुझे थ्रू मैनेजमेंट रिप्रेजेंटेशन मुझे मिल रही है. अब आई वाज डूइंग माय आर्टिकलशिप एंड वन ऑफ माय कलीग, माय फेलो ट्रेनी, आस्क्ड माय मेंटर, माय बॉस, कि सर ये पूरा फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स ही मैनेजमेंट ने बनाया है, हम इतना सारा काम ही क्यों कर रहे हैं. हम कुछ चीजें उनसे लिखवा के लेते हैं, कुछ चीजें हम खुद ऑडिट करते हैं. उनसे लिखवा लेते हैं कि मैनेजमेंट से कि फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट गिव्स ट्रू एंड फेयर व्यू, पीरियड खत्म, इतना काम क्यों करना है. सो आई ऑलवेज रिमेम्बर दैट फनी इंसिडेंट्स. सो ऐसा नहीं है. सारी चीजें आप एज अ सब्स्टिट्यूटिव मेजर मैनेजमेंट से लिखवा के नहीं ले सकते कि एवरीथिंग गिव्स ट्रू एंड फेयर view. We have to apply a judgment. We have to gather the sufficient appropriate audit evidence. एंड जो चीजें मैनेजमेंट की ही डिस्क्रिशन पे डिपेंड करती हैं, सिर्फ वही आइटम्स है जो हम मैनेजमेंट रिप्रेजेंटेशन के फॉर्म में ले सकते हैं. वी हैव टू ऑल्सो रिस्पॉन्ड अप्रोप्रिएटली टू द रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन. या तो उन्होंने प्रोवाइड किए होंगे या नहीं प्रोवाइड किए होंगे. सो रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन, इट्स वन ऑफ द ऑल्टरनेटिव टूल्स एज एन ऑडिट एविडेंस. हाउ? सो ये ऑडिटर्स को जो हमें कॉन्फर्मेशन चाहिए होता है, कई बार डायरेक्टली नहीं मिलता या कई बार डायरेक्टली बुक्स में अवेलेबल नहीं होता, उसकी कोई ऑडिट ट्रेल नहीं होती, देन वी हैव टू टेक इट फ्रॉम द मैनेजमेंट टू हैव द ओवरऑल व्यू ऑन फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स. They do not include financial statements, assertions and supporting books or records. Suppose books, कोई क्वेश्चन कर सकता है, जैसा कि मेरे फेलो कलीग ने किया था, कि अगर फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स, उसके असर्शंस, उसके बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स मैनेजमेंट नहीं बनाए हैं तो क्या हम उसे रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं मान सकते? ऐसा नहीं है. representations are very very specific which are intended by us and given by the management, addressed to us. Written representation provide audit evidence, that they do not provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So they are a substitutive audit evidence. अगर हमारे पास कोई डायरेक्ट एविडेंस नहीं है, लेकिन वो अपने आप में सफिशिएंट अप्रोप्रिएट ऑडिट एविडेंस नहीं है. अगर वो अपने आप में सफिशिएंट अप्रोप्रिएट ऑडिट एविडेंस होते तो जैसा कि मैंने आपको बोला, हम पूरे फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स पे लिखवा लेते थे कि वो those financial statements as per the management are opinion solely by written representation, जैसा कि मैंने बोला. If the management modifies or doesn't provide the requested written representation, the auditor may alert by this to itself. मतलब अगर management is reluctant providing any specific written representation या representation देने के लिए वो reluctant है, तो कहीं ना कहीं वो red flag raise होता है कि कुछ तो problem है. आप कितना written representation पे rely कर सकते हैं? The fact management has provided reasonable written representation. मुझे लगता है कि जो मैनेजमेंट ने written representation दिया वो reasonable है, लेकिन वो मेरे ऑडिट एविडेंस के जो एक्सटेंट मुझे प्रोसीजर करने हैं या बाकी मैनेजमेंट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है उसको उसको वो इम्पैक्ट नहीं करता है. ये दो डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं. गेटिंग द रिप्रेजेंटेशन एंड डूइंग माय रेस्ट ऑफ द ऑडिट या मैनेजमेंट की बाकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लाइक एक्सेस देना ऑडिटर्स को, उनको सपोर्ट करना, बाकी इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोवाइड करना, वो उनका अलग सेट ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, मेरा अलग सेट ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है. एंड रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन इज अ डिफरेंट सेट ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज. मुझे किससे मांगना चाहिए रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन? इज इट सीएफओ, सीईओ, मैनेजमेंट, दोज चार्ज विद गवर्नेंस, द अकाउंट मैनेजर, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. सो जो लोग सॉरी जो लोग responsible है preparation and presentation of financial statements के लिए, I have to ask for the management representation from them. It may be management, means board of directors, or those charged with governance, जो कि designated होते हैं those charged with governance के लिए. और कई बार किसी को वो responsibility designate भी की जा सकती है. कई बार क्या होता है कि actuaries या experts हायर किए जाते हैं, तो हमें हो सकता है फॉर पीस ऑफ दैट इंफॉर्मेशन वो रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन उन लोगों से भी लेना पड़े. इन सम केसेस मैनेजमेंट ने अगर कोई लैंग्वेज लिखा है एज पर देम एंड इट सीम्स रीजनेबल एंड वी डू नॉट हैव एनी रीजंस टू बिलीव अदरवाइज, वी कैन एक्सेप्ट दोज लैंग्वेजेस एज इट इज. Written representations about management responsibility. That's a very specific aspect. So अभी तक हमने बात की कि फिक्स एसेट की लाइफ कितनी होनी चाहिए, इंटरेस्ट रेट आपने कितना लिया, आप लीज कितने साल एक्सटेंड करोगे, लैपटॉप्स को आप कौन से लोगों को कौन से वाले लैपटॉप दोगे, इस तरह की जो चीजें हैं वो तो मैनेजमेंट इज सपोज्ड टू गिव. लेकिन management itself is responsible to carry out certain responsibilities. उसके लिए भी उनको एक स्पेसिफिक रिप्रेजेंटेशन देना पड़ेगा. जैसा कि मैंने आपको बताया कि डायरेक्टर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी स्टेटमेंट होता है एज पर कंपनीज एक्ट, जहाँ पे उनको बताना पड़ता है कि उन्होंने इंटरनल कंट्रोल का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लिया है, कंप्लीट डिस्क्लोजर्स दिए हैं, दे हैव कंप्लाइड विद लॉ. इसी तरह से माय ऑडिटिंग स्टैंडर्ड पैरेलली आल्सो requires to request management to provide a written representation कि उन्होंने अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी समझी है प्रिपरेशन के लिए, और जो फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स है वो एप्लीकेबल फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्टिंग फ्रेमवर्क में बने हैं और कंप्लीट है, और उसमें जो भी ट्रांजैक्शंस हमारी दिखाई जा रही है उसकी इंफॉर्मेशन उन्होंने कंप्लीटली दी है. तो सारी चीजें रिकॉर्डेड है, डिस्क्लोज्ड है, एटसेट्रा. सो ये एक स्पेसिफिक representation है which is not related to a particular caption or assertion. It is applicable to the overall responsibility of the management, that they are taking charge of the completeness of the financial statements, preparing, disclosing, being fair, complying with reporting framework, law and regulation, etc. etc. और कौन सी चीजें हैं जिसपे हमें रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन लेना पड़ेगा? ये एक एग्जॉस्टिव लिस्ट नहीं है. कौन सी पॉलिसी आपने ली, जैसे WDV लिया, SLM लिया, कैरिंग वैल्यू क्लासिफिकेशन आपने कैसे किया, गुडविल की कैलकुलेशन कैसे की, लायबिलिटी के बारे में, कंटिजेंट लायबिलिटी के बारे में अगर आपका कोई भी परसेप्शन बेस्ड कैलकुलेशन है वो आपको लेना पड़ेगा। कंपनी का टाइटल, कंट्रोल, एसेट, कोई लियन या एनकम्बरेंसेस है वो आपको, या एसेट प्लेज्ड है वो आपको उनसे लिखवाना पड़ेगा। लॉ रेगुलेशन या कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल टर्म्स उन्होंने फुलफिल किए वो आपको उनसे लिखवाना पड़ेगा। इसके अलावा भी बहुत सारी चीजें हो सकती हैं, वो इंडस्ट्री टू इंडस्ट्री, कंपनी टू कंपनी, साइज ऑफ द कंपनी पे डिपेंड करेगा। बट what we have to really consider is two simple rule I always tell my team. या तो आपके पास ऑडिट एविडेंस होनी चाहिए या नहीं है, और वो एक ऐसी चीज है कि आपके पास वो ऑडिट एविडेंस हो नहीं सकती, तो आपको मैनेजमेंट से रिप्रेजेंटेशन लेना पड़ेगा, प्रोवाइडेड दैट मैनेजमेंट रिप्रेजेंटेशन इज नॉट अ सब्स्टिट्यूट ऑफ योर ऑडिट एविडेंस, दैट्स अ सपोर्टिव और ऑल्टरनेटिव ऑडिट एविडेंस। आपकी जो डेट है वो कौन सी होनी चाहिए? ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आपने ऑडिट रिपोर्ट साइन किया जुलाई में और रिप्रेजेंटेशन आपका मई का है। सो लार्जली आपकी जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन लेटर होगा उसकी जो डेट होगी वो नियर बाय ऑडिटर्स रिपोर्ट के अराउंड होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि उनको तब तक की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लेनी चाहिए। और जितने भी मेरे फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स उसमें कवर्ड है वो सारा रिप्रेजेंटेशन उसको कवर करना चाहिए। कई बार हो सकता है कि उसमें से आपका मैनेजमेंट बीच में चेंज हो गया, वो पूरे साल उसमें प्रेजेंट नहीं है, तो वो एक स्पेसिफिक नोट जरूर लिख सकते हैं कि हम लोग पार्ट ऑफ द ईयर में नहीं थे, लेकिन दे कैन नॉट टेक अवे फ्रॉम देयर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बिकॉज वो पूरे साल का साइन कर रहे हैं। दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट। तो वो पूरे साल का अगर फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट साइन कर रहे हैं तो they can just say कि we were not part of the entire periods which are covered in the reporting, but they cannot take away the responsibility for that part. They have to take the responsibility entirely. फॉर्म ऑफ रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन कैसे होगा? ये ऐसा नहीं है कि जनरल पब्लिक को आपने टू whomsoever इट में कंसर्न नहीं हो सकता, इट हैज टू बी एड्रेस टू द ऑडिटर्स स्पेसिफिकली। लेकिन अगर किसी लॉ रेगुलेशन में उन्होंने कोई रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन पब्लिक स्टेटमेंट दिया है दैट टू whomsoever इट में कंसर्न दिस लैंड बिलोंग्स टू मी, आप अगर चाहो तो उसको स्किप कर सकते हो, क्योंकि वो आपका एक सब्स्टिट्यूटिव ऑडिट एविडेंस हो गया, तो रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन में कवर करने का जरूरत नहीं है। अब बात आती है कि आप उस रिटन रिप्रेजेंटेशन से बहुत खुश नहीं हो, आपको डाउट है कि आपने जो पास्ट ट्रेंड में देखा और जो अभी आप ऑब्जर्व कर पा रहे हो वो बहुत डिफरेंट है, आप उससे रिलाय नहीं कर पा रहे हो, तो व्हाट नेक्स्ट? तब आपको अगर आता है कि मन में कि मैनेजमेंट कॉम्पिटेंट नहीं है, इंटीग्रल नहीं है, वो एथिक्स पे कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर रहे हैं, या मैनेजमेंट से यू आर नॉट वेरी हैप्पी विद द बैकग्राउंड चेक, और दे आर नॉट कमिटेड टू व्हाट दे आर सेइंग, कभी कुछ बोलते हैं कभी कुछ बोलते हैं, देन यू हैव टू एक्सटेंड योर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स, और आपको उसको एक्सटेंड करने पड़ेंगे ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स को टू गेट एन ऑल्टरनेटिव ऑडिट एविडेंस टू क्लियर योर डाउट्स। लेकिन अगर वो मैटर अनरिजॉल्व रहता है देन यू हैव नो ऑप्शन बट टू टेक अप्रोप्रिएट ऑडिट एविडेंस। और आपके पास एक ही टूल है, आप यू कैन नॉट किल द मैनेजमेंट, यू कैन नॉट hang them, but you have one option which is qualifying or modifying your auditor's report. So if you have any doubt whatsoever on the integrity of the management and what they are saying is not matching with the outcome of the audit report, audit procedures, or what evidence is, you have only one option: to qualify, to modify, to give an EUM, whatever the case may be, depending upon the technical requirements of SA 700 series. अगर मैनेजमेंट आपको रिप्रेजेंटेशन देने से ही मना कर दे तो व्हाट नेक्स्ट? देन इट इज नथिंग बट अ लिमिटेशन ऑफ द स्कोप। अगर वो मना ही कर देता है कि आप हम रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं दे रहे हैं, आपको अभी ऑडिट एविडेंस भी नहीं मिल रही है, यू हैव नो ऑप्शन बट टू डिस्क्लेम द रिपोर्ट एज पर योर प्रोफेशनल स्टैंडर्ड। बट अगेन एनीथिंग विच इज नॉट मटीरियल, सो ऐसा नहीं हो कि छोटे छोटे आइटम पे हमें इसकी कॉन्फर्मेशन नहीं मिली और उसकी कॉन्फर्मेशन नहीं मिली या इसका रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं मिला, चलो क्वालिफाई कर देते हैं या डिस्क्लेम। My entire audit approach and my entire audit methodology revolves around materiality, right? So I will only qualify, I will only give a disclaimer, I will only give an adverse opinion depending upon the pervasiveness of the impact of those representation data. I cannot jump the gun on the management and say, लो ये आपको मैंने disclaimer दे दिया या ये लो मैंने आपको qualify कर दिया, etc. etc. So here the statement what is written disclaiming the report comes with the perception कि ये मेरा pervasive होगा. So that's it from my side. I would like to just spend 5 more minutes on this to revise or to give you a quick recap. Written representation forms a very important part on form part of my audit procedures, so to say. So many times we do not get the exact audit evidence what we are looking at. So, or rather, there are certain things which are dependent upon management wish listed items or their perception, their practices, their projection. So, we cannot leave those items unaudited, unaddressed, undocumented. So, written representation is a means to document a common understanding between me as an auditor and company as the management. Whatever they are saying, we see a value in it. We see a corroborative evidence in terms of past trend. We see whatever projections they are making is at par with industry pattern or is acceptable to the bankers or the supply chain and etc. etc. And I do not have any reasons to believe otherwise. I will accept it as an alternative audit evidence. But having said that, management representation in all the cases is not always a substitute of my audit evidence. If something has to be audited, for example, I have to send the external confirmation to the bankers and the debtors and the creditors and other external parties. I have to send it. I cannot request management to give a confirmation letter that all my debtors are existing and they hold the same value which are given in the financial statement. That's not a substitute. I can only rely upon certain management representation items or letters which are falling within the exact category where I can accept. Life of the asset, goodwill, whether the company will go for merger, whether the company will go for expansion, etc., etc., where it is absolutely the choice of the management. But I cannot leave anything undocumented, untaken. I have to take the management representation for 2-3 types of management representation items. For example, the broadest one is to take the representation for the management responsibility per se, that management is also equally accountable at the first place to take the responsibility for completeness, accuracy, etc. of the financial statements preparation, the internal controls around it, the applicability of law and regulation, applicability of reporting framework, etc., etc. Then only at the second place we will take the responsibility to verify it. Additionally, item wise, we should take and we have to take the representation letters, right? We have all reasons to believe that the management representation may not be right. And as if I said, management representation once taken doesn't mean that whatever verdict they give, we accept it, we fold it and come back home saying that audit completed, done, dusted. No, it's not the case. We have to read through those representations. We have to corroborate it based on past experience, industry trends, peers assessment, acceptability by the stakeholders, my own assessment based on my other clients, etc., etc. If I have reasons to believe, I have all rights to go back to them. I'm not saying argue, but yes, have a professional discussion with them. Then we come on the same page. And if we are not agreeing to what they are saying, we have all reasons to extend our audit procedures. If my extended audit procedures give me the same conclusion, I'm okay. If not, then I have my own audit tools in terms of modification of the auditor's report. Lastly, we understood if the company doesn't want to give or doesn't give the representation, I have again right to apply my auditing standards and auditing procedures to modify my report appropriately. That modification will be based on the materiality of the item involved. Not every item may require a disclaimer or adverse opinion. That's it from my side. Yeah, I'm more than happy to address any query. So I don't know whether I could do justice to today's session or not, but I tried my level best.
थैंक यू सो मच मैम, आपने बहुत ही बढ़िया इलेबोरेट किया दोनों एसेस को, लेकिन तारीफ करनी पड़ेगी आपकी कि आपने इतनी अपनी खस्ता हालत में भी इंस्टीट्यूट
Yes,
को अपना
खस्ता तो है
इंस्टीट्यूट को अपना पूरा समर्थन दिया, रियली कमेंडेबल। कुछ क्वेश्चंस हैं विच आई वुड लाइक टू इलेबोरेट बिफोर यू, जो कि व्यूअर्स ने, तो क्वेश्चंस में पहला क्वेश्चन ये है कि whether it is within the date of balance sheet or even relate to event occurring after the date of balance sheet having substantial impact on financial position of a company. Example where bank or financial student institution gone bad, where the company has its fund in it, etc.
So if I understood the question correctly, the participant is asking what all events or condition we should consider after the close of the year but before the auditor's report. So we have got technical standards. If it's an adjusting event, we have to consider. If it's not an adjusting event, we don't have to consider. So any adjustment which is considered as an post event balance sheet date but considered as an adjusting event, we will consider. But everything till the time, as I mentioned also in my presentation, that till the time I am issuing my report, I have to evaluate each and every transaction or trail of the transaction to see is it impacting my audit opinion for the year ended.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Second question is, can the company estimate useful life other than the one mentioned in Companies Act, or CA can issue certificate with respect to change in life?
I don't think they can go beyond Companies Act. We have to choose any viable option which is given under the Companies Act, because we have to also mention whether the company has complied with laws and regulation. And if there is a dichotomy between Companies Act and accounting standards, we have to abide by law first and then accounting standard to that extent. And what is the second question? The certification methodology, I'm not really sure. That's not my domain. Sorry.
Okay. Basically, he has given an example. Original period of asset was 5 years, and now the management want to increase the period to 10 years for another 10 years. So in that
If
scenario,
they are well within the regulatory boundary, if my law allows you to extend that period and that is given, so that is the maximum boundary which is allowed by the Companies Act, then they can do. But that is subject to actually the useful life of the companies. Like not every company's asset can be extended to its maximum life. If actually that can be extended and that falls within the boundary of the law, it can be done. The certification aspect, I'm not really sure of.
okay. In spite of existence of a SA 540 and 580 in operation, how do we cooperate with mega manipulation?
What a question. As I started with saying, we as an auditor are supposed to have our moral duty as an auditor, right? So I would not like to name companies, and everybody knows what had happened. The biggest, the case which was happening. In the beginning of few years, the company was even presented at best presented financial statement. I do not fully agree that the auditors were also in collusion with the company. बट जब तक चीजें सही चल रही होती हैं, हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना, चोर वही जो पकड़ा जाए. सो जब तक चीजें सही चल रही हैं, जब पकड़ी जाएंगी तब पता चलेगा. सो माय ओनली रिक्वेस्ट टू ऑल माय पियर professional is, please apply your professional skepticism, please apply, document all the professional standards and the guidance. And I can see ICI is doing wonderful job. When we were doing our chartered accountancy, we at times were struggling with some of the materials which were available in the hardbound. Now see the library what ICI has come up with. All the guidance is so well planned, given, arranged in on the main page of the ICI website itself. Everything is available. What is lacking is we are not studying that well. So much of education material and implementation guides are issued and in such a simpler form of FAQs, etc. So I would not ever suggest to go beyond anything what is written. If we even follow the guidance which has been issued, that is more than enough, and we have to apply our moral duty as an auditor.
Okay. How to reconcile estimate and fair value?
See, the specific purpose of fair value is very, very different. So the purpose of fair value may be because of a deal or any other purpose. So the fair value will be dependent upon the purpose. So in the beginning itself, we understood the estimation has to be done as per the framework for which it is being done. So fair value is nothing but one of the categories of estimate. So there may be a delta, maybe or may not be a delta between the two, depending upon the purpose for which we are doing.
Right. Another question, please advise on a use of technology methodology adopted by a company for estimation. Example,
It's
AI.
very, very important these days because, as I mentioned also in one of the slides, that the methods used by the company and the tools used by the company to calculate the estimate, be it a spreadsheet or some internal developed tools or bought out tool, plays a very, very important role. It saves time, it saves energy, it gives us better methodology to calculate that value. But as an auditor, we have to be very, very cautious that there are appropriate controls around it. Management should not be in a position to change the value of the estimate the way they want.
Okay.
Right? It plays a very, very important role.
Right. So, can management representation be taken for audit matter, which is the part of audit scope?
No, I said that. Or management representation can never be a substitute of auditor's evidence or auditor's procedure. If it has to be audited, for example, I gave that example of external confirmation for debtor. अगर मुझे debtors को external confirmation भेजना है, तो मैं management representation से I can't live with it. Management representation उन्हीं cases में हम ले सकते हैं जो management के prerogatives हैं.
Right. How to cope up the situation where the lender's confirmation of the loans paid is not made available despite there are evidences of payments of a previous communication of due payments and in the bank statements?
So he is asking about alternative measures of direct confirmation, which was sort of.
Yes,
So,
yes, maybe.
So we have another standard of external confirmation. It clearly lays out the procedure. अगर आपने कोई direct confirmation भेजा है, आपने first भेजा, second भेजा, third भेजा, नहीं आया, then what alternative procedures we have to see? And most of the time, it's the recovery of the amount in the banks. So अगर आप banks में देख रहे हो और आपके पास कोई रीजन नहीं है कि वो बैंक में अकाउंटिंग एंट्री गलत होगी या फेक्ड होगी या मैनिपुलेटेड होगी, तो यू कैन रिलाई ऑन दैट.
Yes. So last question, sometime as an auditor, we may come to know some third party evidence in material in nature, like newspaper, digital media. So what kind of cognizance will be taken in reporting?
Very much. For example, if we go with the health check or the reputation check of the management, हम लोग एक ऑडिट के लिए जा रहे हैं सपोज, और हम नया ऑडिट है, तो हम सबसे पहले ये देखते हैं कि कंपनी की पोजीशन क्या है. राइट? हमने किसी कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करना है तो हम उसको मैनेजमेंट को चेक करते हैं, उनकी गोइंग कंसर्न वायबिलिटी को चेक करते हैं. अगर कोई न्यूज आती है कि कंपनी की कोई यूनिट बंद हो गई है अचानक से, सो डेफिनेटली दैट रेजेस अ कंसर्न. सो वो कोई भी एक्सटर्नल मीडिया की न्यूज आप इग्नोर कर ही नहीं सकते. इवन इफ एवरीथिंग इज लुकिंग फाइन इंटरनली, मैनेजमेंट इज गिविंग यू ऑल द रिप्रेजेंटेशन कि हमारी कंपनी 15 साल चलेगी, लेकिन आपको दिख रहा है कि अचानक से कंपनी की बिगेस्ट यूनिट बंद हो रही है, या बोर्ड हैज रिजॉल्व टू क्लोज इट, या कंपनी का जो पेरेंट है उन्होंने उसको सपोर्ट लेटर दिया था इन केस ऑफ गोइंग कंसर्न प्रॉब्लम, उन्होंने वो सपोर्ट लेटर विड्रॉ कर लिया, वो न्यूज आपकी कंपनी में आ रही है. राइट? कंपनी इज नॉट डूइंग फाइन और कंपनी ने सपोर्ट लेटर लिया था पेरेंट से, तो जब तक सपोर्ट लेटर था तो हमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं थी, और मैनेजमेंट बोल रहा है वो सपोर्ट लेटर अभी भी है, लेकिन न्यूज में आ रहा है कि वो सपोर्ट लेटर विड्रॉ हो गया है. सो यू हैव द रीजंस टू बिलीव ना कि कंपनी इज गोइंग बैड, तो आपको उसको इग्नोर नहीं करना चाहिए, नहीं कर सकते आप.
For tax audit, can we take stock certificate for closing stock valuation?
Sorry, say that again.
For tax audits, can we take stock certificate for closing stock valuation?
नो सी, ये तो वही हो गया ना कि कंपनी अपनी एक एसेट की एग्जिस्टेंस और कंप्लीटनेस के लिए आपको एक सर्टिफिकेट दे रही है. यू हैव टू हैव सम सॉर्ट ऑफ वेरिफिकेशन दैट मच ऑफ स्टॉक एग्जिस्टेड एट दैट बैलेंस शीट डेट. हाँ, लेकिन अगर आप उस कंपनी का स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिट भी करते हो और टैक्स ऑडिट भी करते हो, तो आपने स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिट के लिए फिजिकल वेरिफिकेशन किया है और पीरियड कोइंसाइड कर रहा है, तो वही प्रोसीजर्स आपके काम आएंगे. अगर आप अकेले उसका स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिट नहीं कर रहे हो और सिर्फ टैक्स ऑडिट कर रहे हो, तो आपको उस पर कोई कंफर्ट तो लेना पड़ेगा ना. तो दैट इज नॉट अ सब्स्टिट्यूट.
So this is all, ma'am. Thank you so much for your commendable support and the wonderful session.
Thank you so much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity again. I'll be coming.
Thank you so much, ma'am, on behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for sparing your valuable time, as well as despite of having the back road, as well as the ill health, you have covered all the aspects of both these standards and in a very lucid manner, along with the examples. Hats off to you, ma'am, and thank you so much once again for your
Thank you.
this deliberation and expertise you have shared with all our members.
Thank you
more
so
than
much, sir.
2,500 members are live at this particular time. And I also extend my heartiest thanks towards the Vice Chairman of J&K Branch, Vineet Kohli, to moderate this webinar, as well as throughout the 2 hours with us, as well as asking various questions of various members and giving your inputs also side by side. So thank you so much, sir, for your precious time and joining AASP for this webinar, as well as ma'am. Thank you so much. And I also
Thank you,
thank
sir.
all the
Thank you so
participants of today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye.